Hey, adventurers, we are back for the Adventurous podcast, and I'm so excited to introduce you guys to John Vitti. He is the founder and CEO of VersusGame, which is one of the fastest, if not maybe the fastest, growing game in the country. He's a serial entrepreneur. He has an incredible story to tell, and I cannot wait to introduce you to John. But before we dive in, let's talk a little bit about Trident Coffee. Trident Coffee takes pride in craft by helping you fuel your day with organic, keto-friendly canned lattes and roasted whole bean coffee, found in Sprouts nationwide and in all high-end natural grocery stores in Southern California. You can also visit one of their tap rooms located in San Diego and immerse yourself in the full experience and shop online, of course, at tridentcoffee.com. Trident Coffee. Live life full steam ahead. So, John, welcome to Adventurous. Finally, I'm so thrilled to have you here.
Thanks for having me. And I just moved to LA and I just started going to Sprouts.
You
So
did
yeah, I'll look for that coffee.
pick up some coffee. Actually,
Yeah.
it's a pretty amazing. If you are a coffee drinker, it's good stuff. I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
And I will fully disclose I'm an investor in Trident Coffee. That aside, I wanted to dive right in with, nobody goes off and builds the fastest growing game in the country and doesn't have some stories to tell. Can you start off, introduce yourself and share with our audience here at Adventurous about you and about VersusGame?
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely, it's giving me some gray hairs for sure and lack of sleep. Well, I guess the way back story is that, give credit where credit's due. My parents were born and raised on a farm in Italy. And I was born in Boston in a basement. So I definitely understand the world of have and have nots. I moved out to California the day after I graduated from university, which I almost failed out of once or twice, I forget.
You're like, doesn't matter.
Yeah, and now I I do guest lecturing at different universities around the country, which is interesting. I think people want the real story and not
Yeah.
just, oh, I had a business idea and then I raised some money and now I'm on my yacht, right? Like it doesn't really work that way.
No.
But yeah, I came out here and jumped into a company called Proofpoint as an employee.
Mm-hmm.
My only company, when I was working for somebody else, I learned a lot, but I was young
Mm-hmm.
and stupid and I had a big ego. I thought I could do things better and differently, like the hallmarks of an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And so I went off my own and I started 4 companies before VersusGame. My first 2 failed miserably. I wouldn't change a thing. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And my last 2 companies I successfully exited. One was in the consumer space and one was in the hardcore B2B tech SaaS space.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole time I've always had this idea for which is now VersusGame. So I kind of figured it out and put it together and we launched it to the public in 2019. And Versus, you want me to jump into what VersusGame is?
Yeah, just share a little bit about what it is and the growth that you guys have been having.
Cool. It's basically a prediction game where people get to predict the outcome of culture. If they're right, they win stuff. So, it could be traffic in LA to what's going on in the crypto world or this TV show or that podcast or whatever music, whatever is trending in the universe finds its way into a game. And people get to answer these questions, play for fun and for free, win cool prizes, play against friends, brands, celebrities, and create their own games too, and let them make some money too. So really empowering users to be part of the conversation, because too many people just sit there and watch, culture go by on whatever screen, right? And we want to interact with it. So, the genesis is that we're consuming so much content all day long. We naturally form these opinions and predictions off that content. It's that reptilian primal part of our brain. We can't stop. We're hardwired to do this. We're having these conversations, but there's no thing for you to do it on. So we built that thing. So this is already your habit, which has helped us get amazing partnerships and a team and stuff like that.
Yeah. So there's an elephant in the room. I want to unpack it a little bit later, which is I had the opportunity to be an early investor in Versus Game and passed, and it kills me. But I had to sit there and watch John on LinkedIn as Versus Game took off, just like I thought it would. And I wasn't a part of it, and it sucks. And that's part
Well,
of being an adventurer. We'll talk about that later.
yeah,
but
everyone takes risks and
you
figures it out.
know, yeah, and I just think you got to come clean with that and be like,
I respect that.
there,
I respect you for that.
yeah, I mean, but before we get there, I wanted to talk about your article in Forbes, and you made a quote, and when I read this quote, I thought to myself, or the article in Forbes that had a feature about you in it, and I thought no one says something like that without having some sort of wisdom that they would want to impart onto another person, and that quote says. Nobody ever says they want to grow up and be stressed out, never have days off, lose friends, and have no salary. But that's what starting and growing a startup in the early days is like. If you're authentic, helpful, love challenges, problem solving, and having the right team around you, then it can be fun and rewarding. But make sure you can't live without creating this business. So you
Yeah.
mentioned when you were giving us your background, you had some failures and you've had, you wouldn't take them back. When you look back at kind of moments in time, when was the opportunity that you almost quit or should have quit in the past, but you didn't? And why didn't you?
Within any company or within
Any
Versus?
company. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's probably multiple opportunities. Pick one, choose
Yeah.
one, multiple moments. But, it's always fascinating. When was the moment when you almost or should have quit? And what
Wow.
kept you from doing it?
That's such a loaded question. So within Versus, even let's go. I like to just be raw and real and transparent.
Mm,
The one of pretty much like in the first couple years of raising money, and any time that happens, I'm like, oh, this is done. Like, it's not going to work, and we're not going to get funding. I should just hang it up.
mm-hmm.
And then the rounds started getting easier and easier, and amazing people started coming in. But definitely in the first couple times that we were fundraising, it's like you get so many no. You're eating no's for breakfast. Like you
I
gotta
know.
love a diet of no's, right? And
Yeah.
and self doubt just absorbs you. It's overwhelming, and so. But if you have this either stupidity or hunger or a little bit, then you can kind of fight through that, and hopefully your gut is right and things start, coming together.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, I wanted to talk about this a little bit later, but, when the time when I had the opportunity to look at Versus Game back when you were called Market Star,
Yeah.
there was, I didn't, it was like kind of this thing. It was so early. I was like, I kind of get it, but I also don't get it, but I
It,
think there's something
well,
here.
it's so new that
And
it's still new. It's like what you have to. It's educational sales.
yeah, well, and it's still like I kind of felt like it was like I saw an opportunity to define a market that didn't exist. The market to create basically to price opinion.
Mhm.
And because if I'm predicting that this celebrity is going to be successful or that celebrity is going to be successful, basically we have just created a market of opinions, of public opinion about culture. And I was like, this is just so fascinating. I was thinking about how markets are made, and I was thinking about how what is the value of of a stock anyway? Is it actually the earnings and the PE ratios, or is it the opinions of of the people? And so
Nailed it.
that was my big impetus for wanting to do Market Star. And this was back when I was at a small VC fund based out of Oregon. But my in early stage investing, and I think also operating in a business, well, I know also because I was a founder, it's an art and not a science. And sometimes you just have to go with your gut, and you have to do things that sometimes don't, you have a hard time justifying it, but you're like, I just know. And
Yeah.
that was where a lot of the clash kind of came from with my other partners, because they were looking for reasons to say no. And
Mhm.
when you look for reasons that it's not going to work, you're going to find them. And I was looking for reasons to say yes. And, I wasn't a senior enough partner at the time. I was not a managing partner. I did not run the fund, so
Yeah,
I
but
didn't get
I
to
mean,
overthrow them.
it must be
Mhm.
so hard to be an investor. Everyone's pitching you these ideas and this and that. It must be, I don't know how you do it. I wouldn't know.
It's heartbreaking to say no to people you don't want to say no to. Like,
Yeah. That's
but I know that
some of them out
have
there have a good time saying no, though. I can feel
I'm
it.
sure there's not my type of people, but it's like when when you're working at such these early stages on such the bleeding edge, you get so much rejection, and it's hard to explain when you're just looking for people who are like, I don't want to see the vision. Like, what do you do about that?
Yeah, I think, well, we're in a little bit of a different spot now, luckily and fortunately, and we're very grateful about it. So, a lot of I mean, the investors from the last round, when we did our Series A, a lot of that was inbound. A lot of that was through referrals from our amazing legendary investors. So it was more about, hey, I'm interested, let's take a look. And then I was able to do my job better by qualifying them in or out. Are they right for us?
Yeah.
And I know not
Hmm.
everyone's in that position, but we got lucky. Like there's not a day that goes by that I don't slap myself a few times for many reasons, and that's one of them. Is just that we're surrounded by amazing people that get shit done. You know.
So when you think about bringing in not just investors in terms of the right people, but even like your core advisors and your team and things like that, can you share about a time that you made a really bad mistake in hiring and or a bad investor fit or whatever? And I think a lot of people just think they find someone, they fit the bill on paper, and they just want to run with it. And I'd love to hear your wisdom about building teams and recruiting the right people around you.
Yeah, I know I made a bad investor mistake my last company, and I learned from that. I was very
Mm.
careful this time. Um, I think it was more on the advisor side that you mentioned,
Mhm. Mhm.
where everyone's like, "I know this, I know all these people, I can do this and that for you, I can deliver you the moon," right?
Yeah.
Um, and then you're like sold because you're hungry and desperate to get some deals done or whatever and meet
Mhm.
people, and then they come on board and then they just kind of disappear, right? And so
Mhm.
had to kick off or stop vesting before, um and it's just like I just want to stay away from certain people. And it's just these things are all organic relationships, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, think about any relationship, friend, partner, lover, whatever, all that stuff is my favorite colors are black and white. I don't ever see those colors anymore. All I see is gray in the world. So it's never a
Mhm.
straight line. And
Yeah.
that's the real deal with relationships.
Yeah. I
And
think a
it's so
lot of
hard.
people.
It's like it's so hard. I'm getting a little better at like smelling that out and weeding them out, where because
Mhm.
you get a lot of attention all of a sudden, and then everyone can deliver everything, and then so you have to get a little smarter and about how to deal with that.
I think some of the best advice I ever got from like major CEOs over and over and over again from different places over and over is hire slow and fire fast.
Yes. Yeah.
And every time I've talked to really successful like founders of unicorn companies, multiple unicorn companies, and I ask them about their success or their advice, I don't even lead them. I just ask. They all start talking about team and hiring and recruiting. It's the number one thing.
Oh yeah, the people are the biggest asset you could ever have, because no matter what happens out there, the good, the bad, and the ugly is going to happen every day. If you have the right team, that you can figure it out. If you
Yeah.
don't, you got to battle all that plus the team. That would be overwhelming.
I had an experience in one of my first tech startups way back in the day. It was called Crowd Compass,
Okay.
and it was acquired by Cvent, which is an event technology company. We were doing mobile apps for events, and that's actually how I got started in the startup
Nice.
world, was through that company. And I was in charge of basically whatever wasn't engineering and wasn't sales.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was like,
Some big hat.
yeah, it was very early. And so I had this little team and I needed to recruit more, and I had a little budget and to work with, and I had this stack of resumes. And there were some people on paper who were very qualified, like you said, and they were promising to deliver the moon. And here I am sitting in a broken school desk in a hot loading dock, sweating and interviewing people, and they're coming in and,
That's really,
um,
I like that.
yeah, I'm like, it was a broken office. The dishwasher didn't work. I mean, you name it. It was a startup.
Why don't people
And,
talk real like this? Like, why don't like me and you fully transparent, no ego, like, or not trying to
yeah,
have ego. It's like, why is everyone so um forced to think that they have to be like the best and it's the best and oh I raised this and that, it was perfect. I don't know. I
it's
don't
such a, yeah, I mean, it's
I think
such a,
that's more
well,
I
it's like,
think it is more harm than good, because the up and comers, if they feel any sense of struggle, I think they're going to be like, oh, well, what's wrong with me? Because all
yes,
these books I read, all these podcasts I listen to, all these blah, 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 founders, they were like one and done. That's not
it's
a,
not. I've been at this for like 7 or 10 years. Like, I think for a while, and by a while, I mean not that long ago, I think my family was legit worried that I was going to end up homeless
oh, yeah.
because I had so many failures. Nothing was working out. Like, I mean, I had some bad, like, garbage fires,
Oh, yeah.
and my family and my friends were like, what is wrong with you? And to now, they don't understand me still. They still don't get this whole thing venture, but they're like, you seem like you're going to be okay.
I remember going out on like dates and going to the ATM. I'm like, dang, I got $40 and
Yeah.
I got all weekend now. Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
Like, there's friends, a date, there's no dinner for $40, right?
So what did you do?
So I got really good at cooking, and
Okay.
it saves a lot of money if you cook, but no, it's
Mm,
more about just not going, avoiding dinner.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
But then you
it's
find
like,
some people that don't care about that, which is the
mhm,
most important thing, because they actually just care about you and not like what you have. And
mhm.
that makes them cool.
Well, and when you're trying to explain, a lot of times you're like, I'm building a company and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. Some people think that's really cool and they want to hear all about it. And other people are like, oh, so you don't like have any time? And you're like,
Yeah.
nope,
Oh my God. I
not
remember
really.
I mean, well, still out hanging out with whoever. And it's like, oh, it's like 10, 11 o'clock. It's like, I gotta go do work. It's a Saturday, but they don't
Hmm.
get it. And sometimes that's a little bit of a struggle if it's a relationship type of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and for me too, in
Really
venture,
awkward.
I'm like fundraising, I'm in a closing, like it happened with you and I called and I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't come because I got to like go. I got invited to this catamaran boat trip with a whole bunch of investors and I have to go, and
Where's my invite? That's not
I'd
cool.
be like, they'd be like, when are you free for dinner? I'm like,
Yeah.
2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm
Really.
sorry.
Yeah. I mean,
Like,
I
it's
was
like
up
such a
last night
challenge.
until 11:30,
Hmm.
just banging away on spreadsheets and math for partners.
Ugh.
And then I had a 6 a.m. call this morning. Like, it's just, and that's all week. It's 8 days a week, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, exactly. It's yeah, the struggle is real. But, I think like what you were saying, I ended up hiring the person who was like resume at the bottom of the stack. Maybe on paper I would have scored his qualifications on paper as like a C.
And how
And
were they when they came through, when they started?
people thought I was crazy. They were like, "You pass on all these guys and you want him? Him?" And I was like, "I want him." And the thing about it was because I was like in my head thinking, I don't care. Like when things get hard, you and I, this we'll figure it out. Me
Yeah.
and those guys, we're not going to figure it out together.
Yeah.
And my hire, he stayed with that company for almost a decade.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Hmm.
The first thing I look for when hiring anybody is they ideally they started their own company.
Hmm.
'Cause then they've been through shit. They've been through
Yeah.
hell. And so,
They have the
if
grit. They
yeah,
have the
even if they failed or
perseverance.
succeeded, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And then I want them to be smarter than me. I love being the dumbest person in the room for sure.
Yeah. I joke with people because people think since I'm a VC, I'm some sort of like amazing genius. And I'm like, I actually am the stupidest person in my firm. I
Yeah.
know one thing and one thing alone: early stage venture capital. Like,
Specialized,
and
specialized, specialized. Yeah.
yeah, and everyone else is like incredibly smart. They have PhDs,
Yeah.
master's degrees, they're doctor. Like, I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
I'll get the deal done.
Good. There's room for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. So when you're talking about looking for that person who has that grit and who has that background and that experience in a startup because they're going to be a good fit on the team, what kind of questions do you ask for? What do you look for when you're courting people and meeting people to see who has it and who doesn't?
It depends on the role, and I usually do more like the business side, obviously, but
Hmm.
I wish I was technical. In another life,
Yeah.
I'd be a designer and an engineer. Uh,
Oh, in another life, I'd be in art history.
oh, no, oh, okay. In another life, I'd be food history or food
Yeah.
traveler.
Yes, okay.
I
We're
still want
going.
to do
Yeah.
what I'm doing now. I mean, I would want to know design and know engineering so I could
Hmm.
just talk and not be like, what happens now? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but anyway, so on the business side, yeah, I ask, I love understand. It's about for me, it's about understanding their arc, their journey,
Hmm.
and because if you can, if you can look for if you can discover patterns and trends, um,
Hmm.
then and they're good, obviously, during an interview or anything in life, if you can
Hmm.
discover patterns and trends, then you can understand things at a deeper level. And so I try to look for that through their journey, their arc. Uh,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's always about asking, point blank, have you worked for another company? Like, do you like startups? Have you done your own startup? Um, you know, all those types of questions are really important. I'm trying to dig in and figure out what was your hardest time and how did you get through that?
Hmm. Hmm. So, what was your hardest time, and how did you get through that?
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, oh my God. And every company, there's so many. I remember I remember the consumer company I had, it was a product, a physical product. And
Hmm.
I was living in like an apartment condo in San Francisco, and I just had, no storage. So I had to put everything in my condo, and I was just living in boxes um and and then that plus one of those companies, when it folded, I had to figure out how to pay off a bunch of debt. This is one of the
Hmm.
not succeed. I had to pay off a bunch of debt and then figure out how to start over, recreate it myself, and start over and start something else. And then going from that failure to something else and trying to go raise money with an idea with a zero on the board was super hard because the investors
Yeah.
had your patterns and trends, right? They look
Hmm.
at successes, and if you don't have any and you have fresh off a failure, you got to figure it out real quick. And so that's when you just do yourself, and until it becomes hard to ignore for investors and partners and things like that. It's so hard. That's a lifetime of knowledge and learning that. It's hard.
So, there's something you're hitting on here that I find a very, in my opinion, is almost a deep and almost like a spiritual principle. Most people would throw in the towel and they would say, I failed and I have debt to pay and I'm going to go get a job
Mhm.
and I'm going to, act like a regular person and go do that. You didn't.
Yeah, I can tell
Why
why.
not?
Yeah. So this stems from my childhood. I didn't know it then, but I discovered this maybe like 10 years ago. I was so aware of it. I was self-aware of this, even though it was in my DNA. But my father, my parents were born on a farm. There's no college education. There's no education.
Hmm.
And they were doing, whatever jobs. Like my family was the ones on the street corners with the bag trying to pick up work for construction for the day,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
They're from Italy, and they just worked with it. They were like, "I'm going to be a laborer," right? And so, anyways, my dad was always getting fired. Like I'd either never see him, like 8 days a week. I'd never see him for breakfast or dinner. Right? He would come home and have like a little piece of bread and a little tiny glass of wine and pass out, and I wouldn't see him. Or I'd see him for like half a year or 4 or 5 months. Because he was either always working hard for somebody else, or he was always getting laid off or let go or fired or whatever. And so I didn't know it then, but that deeply affected me because I discovered that, I need to be able to control my own destiny. And so I just kept on going. Plus, when you realize, and that word is very specific because it's not think, but when you realize there's the idea is good and this should be out there in the world, not that you think it's going to work or whatever. You realize, like, you have a pure belief, like a religion, like you believe, right? What's that saying? There's no atheists in foxholes, right? Like, you gotta believe.
Yeah.
And when you just have that and it keeps you up at night, so those two things together, formed me, I guess.
So, you had a formative experience, obviously, growing up, or many of them. And I understand that too. I was, oldest of three. I had a single mother. And, I have a lot of that in me too. Like, I never want to be in that position where I can't control my destiny. But, I think at a certain point, that's not even enough. When the going gets really tough, it's like, for me, it comes down to, I know that I was meant to do this. And I refuse to act and operate as somebody that I'm not meant to be. And so, I'm curious, what you feel in terms of, like, ultimately your purpose as an entrepreneur. How do purpose and entrepreneurship intersect in your world?
I think it really goes back to, like, you have that deep realization, that belief that's in your core that this thing has to happen. This has to be out there. I'm the person to do it. I can do it. But all that is taught over time because no one's born, like, I don't know, with that confidence or stupidity, a little bit of both, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's like, when you believe in this thing, that's your purpose, that's your calling, it just has to be something that you can't ignore. Like, if you're
Yeah.
like, it's one of those things, like, what do you do every day? Can you monetize that, right? And you have to love it, because you do it every day, you have to love it, right? So if that's like exercise, fine. If that is reading, fine. If that's watching TV, fine. Whatever it is. But if you are addicted to this thing, I mean, every day, then that's your purpose. That's your calling, But if it's like something you can just put down, like, I'll get to it on Monday because it's Saturday, right? It's not quite there yet,
Yeah. I get that. Like,
It's obsession, and that's not healthy. I'm trying to find a
it
balance.
is. Yeah. Balance. Yeah.
Whatever.
I've got, it's interesting because how I came to entrepreneurship many years ago was actually started out as a writer.
Nice.
And, one of the things that I learned as a writer was you have to be like so obsessed with your story and with getting it out in the world that you'll do anything.
Yeah.
And that's why the best journalists are like dogs, like just dogs on a bone. They'll go, they don't care. And, one of the journalists that I just totally idolize is Anderson Cooper. I've always really respected Anderson Cooper. One of the reasons why is because he was flying himself. He was going himself as a young journalist, like in a teen, to war zones because he had to report the news.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that person, Edward R. Murrow, hiding, in a tiny apartment. Senator McCarthy's after him. They're going to throw him in jail for life. He's reporting about McCarthyism and the whole witch hunt around communists and calling out people and things like that. His life is in danger, and he continues to broadcast because he has to. And, people will be like, Anderson Cooper, is like the son of, Gloria Vanderbilt, and he had a silver spoon in his mouth. I don't care about that. In fact, that probably made him even a better journalist because he didn't need to make the money. So he's like, I'm going to go out there and show everyone what's happening in Kosovo because I'm in a position of privilege to be able to do that. And I'm like, respect. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Talk about a purpose if you're going to put your life on the line.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's still
And I mean, when you're like
that's
19,
insane too.
yeah, he's crazy. Yeah. But journalists are like that, like true journalists, not today's clickbait writers. And so that's how, when I started writing, it was like I fell into the startup world randomly, and that's another story. But it was like, if you will literally die if you don't get this story, then you're writing the right story and you are doing what you need to be doing. And that's kind of how it needs to feel like a company, like starting your company. Like if you will wither up and die if you don't do it,
Yeah,
then you
1000%.
should do it.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's it in a nutshell, literally.
I felt like when I worked in some jobs, like worked for companies, I felt like I was dying. Like honestly, I was like, I'm withering up, and
Yeah. The other way, the bad way though.
in the bad way. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Like
know.
not the good way, not the good way. Well, so I would love to leave our readers with a really strong piece of wisdom, for not readers, we're talking about writing, listeners, with a really strong piece of wisdom from you. So if you were sitting across from someone who was basically you maybe 10 years ago, and they're in that horrible place, their apartment is full of inventory and they owe everyone money. They have failed and failed and failed and failed. And they are all of a sudden sitting across from you having coffee, and you have just a few minutes to tell them something that's going to change their life. What would you say?
I got
And
this.
you don't have to be eloquent about it. You can like struggle all you want.
I'm not eloquent at all in this conversation.
Yeah.
That's not me. So I got this, and it's something that I live by because I lived it, which is you've already experienced the worst, right? You're in that really kind of tough place. So who cares? Like you've already experienced the worst. It can only get better, right? You already know. So what does this feel like? You're experiencing now. What does that feel like? Okay. You're still going to wake up tomorrow. You still have an opportunity to
So what are you afraid of?
What are you afraid of? Go try
because
again.
the worst already happened.
Absolutely. There's
yeah,
exactly.
You know, the prior episode to you, Chris Thompson from Sober Psychic, you know, his story, Sober Psychic, basically started when he woke up on the sidewalk on Thanksgiving morning, soaked in rain, and was like, could this be the first day of my next, like, you know, and I don't even know. I'm like, that must have come from like God or something, because I don't know how he would have come up to that. He was in like that state of alcoholism when you get the tremors and things. And he started Sober Psychic, which has turned into a movement. But that, what you said there is similar to his thing, which is like, you're already like at rock bottom.
I think you're going to find when you talk to a lot of these entrepreneurs is they all know how to fail. They all have failed. They've all been at their worst. That's another trend for sure.
It's a matter of just like, I think at the end of the day, like you said, you've got to believe.
Yeah.
Because when you have no proof.
Yeah. If you can get through that, then you can get through a meeting or a tough call or whatever, you know?
Yeah. And it's a numbers game. Your hit rate, you know, you run a game. You're running a gaming company. You know this. The hit rate, you're eventually going to hit.
Yeah.
If you just stick with it. But yeah. Well, any final words? What's that?
Thanks for asking, by the way. That was a cool question.
You're welcome. It's my job. Do you have any final words for our audience here at The Adventurers, who are primarily entrepreneurs, VCs, investors, people who are on this crazy journey of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I would say get crazy in love with what you're doing, you know?
Like Beyonce style.
Is that yes, for Beyonce.
That's your Beyonce song, yes.
I'm not that cool.
You're not that cool, yet you run a game that
everyone around
pop
me is
culture.
Cool. Everyone around me.
Cool, you hire other people to be cool for you.
Cool people.
All right. Well, adventurers, here you have it. John Vitti from VersusGame. I will go ahead and put a link so you guys can all download VersusGame and get started monetizing your knowledge about culture that John doesn't have. So you better go in and get on there and help him out. There'll be some links in the show notes. John, is there any other way that you would like people to be able to connect? Is there anything that you'd like to share before we sign off?
Yeah, I guess you can go check us out on Instagram at VersusGame, and you can go check out the website as well, versusgame.com. And yeah, we have a fun TV show coming out next year. We're getting it produced,
Ooh.
hopefully coming out. Mark Burnett producing it, so that'll be fun. So we'll be in a few places on your screens.
That'll be a fascinating game. All right. There will be cool stuff in the show notes. And thank you so much for your time today, John.
Thank you.